You're standing in your kitchen at the end of a long day, and without really thinking about it, you turn a dial and a flame appears. You drop something raw into a pan. You wait a few minutes, and a chemical transformation unfolds in front of you that you have completely stopped noticing. The smell changes, the color changes, the texture changes, and then you eat it. And your body extracts more energy from that meal than it possibly could have if you'd eaten the exact same thing raw. This is the most ordinary act in the modern world. It is also one of the strangest things any animal on Earth has ever done. Because here's the thing. No other creature does this. Not the chimpanzees who share almost 99% of your DNA, not the wolves, not the crows that use tools, not a single one of the millions of species that have ever lived. Only humans take their food, apply fire to it, and transform it before it ever reaches their mouths. So the question is not really how we cook. The question is why. Why did a hungry, vulnerable primate on the African savanna ever look at fire, the single most dangerous force in its environment, and decide to bring its dinner closer to it instead of running away? The popular story goes something like this. One day, long ago, some clever ancestor discovered that meat left near a wildfire tasted better, and cooking was born as a happy accident of flavor. It's a charming story. It's also almost completely wrong, or at least it explains almost nothing that actually matters. Because cooking is not fundamentally about taste. Cooking is not a culinary preference that happened to catch on. Cooking is a biological event, one so profound that it may have physically rebuilt the human body, shrunk our guts, expanded our brains, and reshaped the entire trajectory of our species. Taste is the footnote. Survival is the story. To understand why, you have to understand a brutal, unglamorous fact about being a large-brained animal. Your brain is extraordinarily expensive. It makes up roughly 2% of your body weight, and yet it consumes around 20% of your energy, every single hour of every single day, whether you're solving a problem or staring at a wall. That is an enormous metabolic bill. And for most of evolutionary history, the fundamental problem facing any animal that wanted a bigger brain was simple and merciless. Where does the energy come from? You cannot grow an organ that demands that much fuel unless you find a reliable way to pay for it. Consider what raw food actually demands of you. A gorilla, an animal built around eating raw plants, spends somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a day just chewing. Not gathering, not searching. Chewing. Its jaw muscles are massive. Its gut is enormous. A vast fermentation chamber designed to slowly break down tough, fibrous, low-energy material. Raw food is stubborn. It resists you. Your body has to spend energy to unlock the energy inside it, and much of what's locked in there, you never get at all. The cellulose passes straight through. The proteins stay coiled and hard to digest. Raw is safe, but raw is slow, and raw is expensive. This is where fire changes everything. When you apply heat to food, you are doing something remarkable. You are beginning digestion outside the body. Heat breaks down the tough cell walls of plants. It unravels the tightly folded proteins in meat, a process chemists call denaturing. Turning coiled molecules your gut struggles with into loose strands, it can strip apart with ease. Heat gelatinizes starches, making them dramatically easier to absorb. In effect, cooking does a huge portion of the work your teeth, your stomach, and your intestines would otherwise have to do, and it does that work before the food ever passes your lips. Fire, in a very real sense, became an external stomach. And the numbers here are not subtle. Studies feeding cooked versus raw diets have found that cooking can increase the energy your body actually extracts from a meal by a staggering margin. With eggs, digestibility jumps from around 60% raw to over 90% cooked. With starchy foods, the gains are even more dramatic. Research led by the primatologist Richard Wrangham, who has spent decades arguing this exact case, showed that animals fed cooked food consistently gained more weight than those fed the identical food raw, even when the calorie counts on paper were the same. The paper calories lie. The body knows the difference. Cooking doesn't just make food nicer, it makes food richer. So now imagine what that unlocks. Suddenly, that same 6 to 8 hours of chewing collapses into perhaps 1. Suddenly, the enormous gut needed to ferment raw plant matter becomes unnecessary, and the human gut is, in fact, remarkably small for a primate our size. Suddenly, there is a surplus of energy and a surplus of time. Two things that were almost impossibly scarce for the entire history of life on Earth. An energy that no longer has to be spent grinding through raw fiber and running a massive digestive system becomes energy that can be spent somewhere else. Somewhere expensive. Somewhere that had never been affordable before. This is the heart of what Wrangham called the cooking hypothesis, and it is genuinely radical. The idea is that cooking did not simply feed the human brain. Cooking is the reason the human brain could exist at all. Look at the timeline. Around 2 million years ago, one of our ancestors, Homo erectus, underwent a dramatic transformation. The gut got smaller, the teeth got smaller, the jaw muscles shrank, and the brain began to grow and grow and grow. These changes happened together, as a package, and the cooking hypothesis argues that the thing making the whole package possible was heat applied to food. Think about what your own body quietly confesses. Your jaw is weak. Your teeth are small and blunt compared to other apes. Your stomach is modest. Your intestines are short. You are, biologically speaking, an animal that has already outsourced a huge amount of its digestion to something external. You are built as though you expect your food to arrive pre-processed. And in the wild, without tools, without fire, that expectation would be a death sentence. Raw food enthusiasts who eat nothing but uncooked food in the modern world, with blenders and year-round abundance, still frequently struggle to maintain their weight. Your body is not designed to run on raw. It never was. But a hypothesis is only as strong as the evidence in the ground. And here the story gets genuinely difficult, because fire is one of the hardest things in the world to find archaeologically. Fire leaves ash, and ash blows away. It leaves charcoal, and charcoal decays. A campfire from 100,000 years ago is a whisper. A campfire from 1,000,000 years ago is almost silence. So archaeologists have spent decades hunting for the earliest solid, undeniable trace of a human ancestor deliberately controlling flame, and the search has been full of tantalizing hints and furious disagreement. Some of the oldest contested evidence comes from a site in South Africa called Wonderwork Cave, where researchers found burned bone and ashed plant material in layers dating back roughly 1 million years, deep inside a cave where a natural wildfire would struggle to reach. At Kubifora in Kenya, there are patches of reddened, heat-altered sediment that some argue point to controlled fire even earlier. These sites are debated, picked apart, defended, and attacked because the stakes are enormous. If our ancestors were cooking 1,000,000 or more years ago, then fire wasn't a late luxury of clever modern humans. It was there near the very beginning, shaping us as we became human. By around 400,000 years ago, the argument mostly ends, because the evidence becomes overwhelming. Across Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, you start finding unmistakable hearths, repeated fireplaces used again and again in the same spot, ringed with burnt stone, littered with charred bone. At a site in Israel called Kesem Cave, there is a central hearth that was used over and over across tens of thousands of years, surrounded by the cut-marked, fire-touched remains of countless meals. This is not an accident of lightning. This is a household. This is a species that had made fire the center of its life, the way it remains the center, however hidden, of yours. And this reveals something that goes far beyond digestion, because a hearth is not just a cooking device. A hearth is a gathering point. Think about what fire actually did to the shape of a human day. Before fire, the darkness ended everything. When the sun went down, activity stopped, because the night belonged to predators with far better night vision than yours. Fire pushed the darkness back. It extended the day by hours. It created, for the first time in the history of any animal, a warm, lit circle of safety where the group could sit together after the work was done and simply be in each other's company. Anthropologists who have studied modern hunter-gatherer groups, like Polly Weissner's work with the Ju-Hoansi people of the Kalahari, found something striking. The conversation around the daytime fire and the conversation around the nighttime fire were completely different. During the day, people talked about practical things, resources, complaints, plans, logistics. But at night, by the fire, the talk turned to stories, to myth, to people who weren't there, to the imagined and the absent and the dead. The firelight created the conditions for storytelling, and storytelling is the technology that carries culture, memory, and meaning from one mind to another across generations. Consider the chain of events fire quietly set in motion. Cooking freed up energy, and that energy grew the brain. Cooking freed up time, hours that had been chained to chewing and digesting, and that time could now be spent on tools, on planning, on one another. And the fire itself, the source of all of it, became a place, a fixed point around which a group had to cooperate, share, and communicate to keep the flame alive. Cooking didn't just build a bigger brain, it arguably built the social world that bigger brain needed in order to have anything to think about. And there is a subtler consequence still, one that reaches right into how we live now. Cooking almost forces a division of labor. Someone has to gather the fuel. Someone has to tend the flame so it doesn't die. Someone has to prepare and process the food, and someone has to go out and acquire it in the first place. A raw-eating animal simply grabs and swallows on the spot, alone, whenever it finds something. But a cooking animal has to bring food back, to a place, to be processed and then shared. Cooking is intrinsically communal in a way raw eating never is. Fire made the meal a meeting. This may even connect to one of the oldest and most loaded divisions in human society. Because once food had to be carried, processed, guarded, and cooked at a home base, while acquiring it often meant traveling far away, you have the raw ingredients of a split, a division of tasks that many, though far from all, human cultures would later map onto sex and gender in endless different configurations. I want to be careful here, because the anthropology is genuinely complicated and the arrangements vary wildly across cultures. But the deep point stands. The hearth created a center, and a center creates roles, and roles create the intricate social machinery we've been negotiating ever since. There's a final piece to this that often gets forgotten, and it's a dark one. Fire didn't only unlock energy, it unlocked safety in the most literal sense. Raw meat is dangerous. It carries parasites, bacteria, and pathogens that can kill you. Raw plants contain toxins and compounds that are indigestible or outright poisonous. Heat neutralizes a huge portion of that danger. It kills parasites in flesh. It breaks down toxins in tubers and beans that would otherwise make you violently ill. Cooking is, among everything else, an ancient and invisible form of medicine, a way of making the poisonous edible and the deadly safe, performed at every meal without a single person understanding the chemistry behind it. Think of how many plants become edible only after cooking. Certain beans are toxic, raw, and nourishing cooked. Many tubers and roots that fed entire populations are inedible or dangerous until heat transforms them. Fire didn't just extract more energy from the food our ancestors already ate. It expanded the menu itself, turning vast categories of the natural world that had been closed, poisonous, or worthless into reliable, storable, life-sustaining food. A landscape that offered a raw-eating animal very little suddenly offered a fire-wielding one an abundance. Fire didn't just change the meal. It changed what the entire planet was willing to give you. So let's return to that ordinary evening in your kitchen, the dial, the flame, the pan, the transformation you'd stopped noticing. What you are actually doing when you cook is repeating the single most consequential behavior in the history of your species. You are performing, without thinking, the act that may have shrunk your ancestors' guts and grown their brains. You are recreating the circle of light that pushed back the darkness and gave rise to language and story. You are practicing a form of medicine older than any written word. You are, in the most literal biological sense, doing the thing that made you human in the first place. We tend to think of the great human revolutions as the ones written in stone and steel. Agriculture, cities, writing, machines. But the deepest revolution of all left almost no monument behind. It was a hominid, standing in the flickering dark, holding a piece of food toward a flame that every instinct in its body screamed at it to flee from, and choosing, against all of that instinct, to stay. That choice paid for the brain reading these words. That choice built the mind that would one day look back across 1,000,000 years and ask why. Fire didn't just cook our food. Fire cooked us. And the flame on your stove tonight is the same flame, still quietly rebuilding what it means to be human, one meal at a time. If you want to go deeper into how fire, food, and the human body shaped one another, and explore the full story of how our ancestors actually lived, ate, and survived, that's exactly what our companion course is built for. You'll find the link in the description. But for now, the next time you turn on that flame, remember what you're really holding. Not just dinner. The oldest technology we ever invented, and the one that invented us right back.